let's quickly turn our attention to the other colleague, that's editor Dianne Hawker, who is also within the court present. Dianne, I understand you have Mhanga with you. Some suggestions by Mzwanele that the NPA seems to agree in some way about the conduct of Billy Downer. Is that true? Can Mhanga clarify that?
I've got Mr. Mhanga here and actually a whole lot of other people who are hoping to speak to him soon, so I'm going to jump right into it. Mr. Mhanga, a lot of issues or things being said here by Mr. Mzwanele. I saw you listening with one ear to what he was saying. He seems to be suggesting that there is, I think he said, the fruit of a poisoned tree in this case, and I saw you shaking your head when he was making some of those comments. What is your response?
I'm wondering what Mr. Manye was listening to, because it cannot be the same judgment that I listened to. This is a well-reasoned judgment, because the judge is saying all their allegations of bias and improper conduct on the part of Mr. Downer are based on hearsay, and therefore they are baseless. And as such, the issue of political interference, the issue of bias, was pronounced upon by the SCA, by the full court here. Hence, the judge says, I am reaffirming or aligning myself with those pronouncements. Now, they are alluding to the fact that they will take this on appeal. Whatever legal avenue they explore, as the prosecution, we are ready. We have vigorously opposed this application based on solid arguments which found their way into the judgment. We are going to apply the same meticulous prosecution strategy that we applied in the appeal that they will be mounting against the judgment of Judge Cohn.
Now, Mr. Mhanga, one of the things that seems to have come up is there's a court date that's been decided on, but at the same time a suggestion that there might be another delay. A lot of stop-starts in this case, but the Zuma team has repeatedly accused the NPA of being the ones that are delaying this matter. Do you think that on the 11th of April we will actually have a trial beginning with witnesses?
They have alluded to the fact that there might be some interlocutory applications. My sense of it is that these are appeals that they'll be mounting against the judgment. We are hoping that by stretching the date to the 11th of April, they would have disposed of all these interlocutory applications so that it has no bearing that will delay the start of the trial on the 11th of April. We've been long waiting for this. We've been long waiting to put our first witness on the witness box so that the trial can proceed. Fortunately, they've already pleaded not guilty, which means that the next step is for the state to lead its evidence on the 11th of April 2022.
There is this one outstanding matter of Advocate Billy Downer in the criminal case that has been opened. He has not been charged as we speak. It's just a case that was opened by former President Jacob Zuma. Are you not worried about that?
We are not worried at all, given the fact that these are two issues, Mhanga. You've got a criminal case that has been opened. You've got a special plea that has now been dispensed with. Now, the DPP in KZN has to objectively deal with that matter. No decision has been taken yet, and therefore it has no bearing on whether Mr. Downer will be proceeding with the matter or not. We are steadfast and ready to proceed with Mr. Downer as the lead prosecutor in the case. He will see this prosecution through.
Your first witness on the 11th of April, will there be Patricia de Lille?
Come again?
Your first witness on the 11th of April, will it be Patricia de Lille?
Is it not possible for you to come here on the 11th of April so that you can see that?
If you can tell us, because you know she was here previously.
Well, she's one of the witnesses. We'll decide which one to call first.
Mr. Mhanga, just to follow up also on one of the issues raised in court was this issue of Mr. Zuma's medical condition, and the judge sought to clarify this. Is the NPA still going to be continuing with its plans to get its own assessment of his health state, considering that he's not released on medical parole, but he has attended court, and there seems to be a suggestion that he might not attend on the 11th. Are you going to try and seek your own clarity?
What the judge was saying and the legal representative of Mr. Zuma was saying was that, is it necessary during the interlocutory applications for him to make appearances, given that he has no role to play in those applications. And the judge says, look, we will have to be guided by submissions made by both parties insofar as his required attendance is concerned. But on the 11th of April, he is expected to be here.
Thank you. That's Advocate Mthumzi Mhanga just speaking to the media outside court and responding to some of the issues raised by the spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation, Mr. Mthwanele, who spoke quite spirited here outside court. Mr. Mhanga was actually listening to that interchange and reacting on the fly to that. We are nearing the end of the day here in court. The activity is dying down somewhat as the court has already concluded its proceedings, and of course we prepare to return here on the 11th of April, hopefully for the trial to actually begin and hopefully to start seeing some witnesses after quite a lengthy period of this case continuing in a stop-start manner.
Dianne Hawker, thank you very much. Let's take you outside court now. Karinda Jagmohan standing by to try and make sense of this, legally so, legally speaking perhaps I should say. Karinda, good morning to you once again. So the former president intending to bring an appeal against today's decision. What are legal experts saying?
Indeed. Well, I'm joined by Mpumelelo Zikalala. Thank you for speaking to us. Let's continue our conversation. You did mention that the former president can indeed appeal. It seems like this is what he is intending to do from what his teams are saying. Perhaps for the simple man who's watching, can you explain what that process would entail, and would it delay starting this trial on the 11th of April?
Definitely to delay starting the trial on the 11th of April. Let's remember, you first have to make an application to this judge, Judge Kun, and say to him, I believe that your fellow brothers and sisters in the Supreme Court of Appeals would come to a different conclusion when presented with the same facts. Can you allow me to go there? If he then allows them, then an application is made to the SCA, and then the SCA will adjudicate the matter. If he refuses, then another application is made to the SCA itself to petition it in terms of saying, we've tried your fellow brother at Judge Kun, he has refused us, please allow us an opportunity to deal with this particular matter. The same thing would apply from the SCA to the Court. So within the amount of time that would lapse with those two processes is definitely more than a year, and you could see us not being able to start this particular trial on the 11th of April 2022.
Wouldn't this further impact the trial itself by virtue of extending it once again? This has been decades in the making. What does this mean for Zuma? Would he have grounds then to say that since trial has not started, I should not be charged?
No, he can't be able to do that, because the reasoning will then be, but you were part of the process of the delays that were taking place. Let's look into the merits, whether those delays were necessary or not. But we have been part and parcel of us not being able to start on this particular date, so that can't be the sole reason for the charges being withdrawn against you. But then he would say, I have all the avenues and the rights so that I'm able at the end of the day to protect my rights from one court to another. So definitely when it comes to delays, they can't be attributed to one person. What is worrying though is this. Let's remember that the longer the trial or we get to the actual trial date, the quality and the quantity of the evidence deteriorates. The number of people are going to pass on, number of people are going to forget. Evidential material that must be introduced by living human beings may be left out, hanging out in the balance and can't be used by this honorable court. And that applies both ways, by the way, both to the state and both to the former president. As in order for you to win or to lose your case, you need those witnesses to go to the witness box to introduce that particular evidence. Now, if you don't have them, or the evidence in which you want to introduce has been destroyed or can no longer be found, then it means that you will not be able to win your particular case. So the quicker they start is actually beneficial for both parties, the state and the former president.
So then in your expert analysis and judging by the number of appeals that we are seeing and maybe seeing in future, do we intend seeing even the start of this on the 11th April, or even then so do we intend seeing a conclusion of this by next year or even 2023?
Let me put my head on the block and say, if it turns out that all the avenues that will be tried by the former president are going to fail, you may see the actual start of the trial date being in 2023 and not 2022.
Mr. Mpumelelo Zikalala, thank you so much for your time and for unpacking the court matters for us. There you've heard now that with the appeals that are coming through, and it seems likely that the former president's legal team may appeal the decision just made today by Judge Petkun, it may be likely that trial start could be postponed. It's now scheduled for the 11th of April, and we have to see a conclusion to this. But one important factor here is that the more appeals we're seeing, the further that trial is delayed, could then hamper the evidence that would be brought forward to be used in this trial. Witnesses may, witnesses may be impacted by this, and there could be all sorts of factors to be taken into consideration as this trial, decades, years in the making, continues to be delayed. The next court date now for the former president to come back here to the Pietermaritzburg High Court is on the 11th of April next year, so we'll see whether or not that date still stands.
Jacob Zuma wrapping up the proceedings there at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Well, so many questions that this springs up with every appeal that seems likely at this stage. Do you remember the former president pleading poverty not so long ago? Begs the question, just how big is his war chest on this matter?